But since they are not all back, from an administration position or from your perspective, have the Border Patrol unions and the HHS unions been easier to work with than the teachers' unions?
I think that's a little bit of mixing different circumstances. I would say that
It's children all in tight quarters. I mean, a classroom.
not quite.
Not funny.
Not quite. I would say that let's take a responsible approach to the two issues. Okay, one is schools reopening. There's been 8 mitigation steps that have been announced by the CDC to implement. Right.
Yeah.
Every school district is going to work to implement those on a timeline that is they can effectively do. Many school districts are reopening, right? Many are reopening every single week and day and week, right? That is a different circumstance than what we are seeing at the border. And the HHS oversees these facilities, right? They're working on ensuring we can have more kids safely. They are working to implement CDC guidelines, but they are different circumstances, and certainly we're working with the school districts, and we're also working with HHS to open these facilities or to ensure that kids are treated with safety and care in these facilities. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Just a little bit more on the Quad. You mentioned yesterday that one of the issues that will be discussed is how the leaders can work together to combat the pandemic. Might that discussion include a strategy to counter vaccine diplomacy from China and Russia?
I think there'll be a range of topics discussed, and I know that it is a concern of a number of leaders around the world, including, of course, President Biden, and I'm sure we'll have a readout of the Quad meeting tomorrow once it's completed.
Just a little bit more on the announcement, if you can preview it. Can we expect anything in terms of how the Quad, what kind of commitment they would give in terms of helping other countries to access vaccines?
Again, I know they'll discuss a range of issues tomorrow, but I think it's important to just take a little bit of a step back, because this is a meeting that covers a range of topics. Of course, I'm sure COVID, which is a pandemic everyone in the world is dealing with, will be a topic of discussion, but there'll be issues like climate that are addressed, economic cooperation. I'm sure they'll have a range of issues to bring up, and we will provide a readout when the meeting concludes tomorrow.
A little bit more on that. What about in terms of the military balance? I mean, we know that China just announced a huge defense spending, 6.8%, I believe, for this year. Is that also a top item in the agenda?
I don't think I have more to preview than what we've already offered. We will, of course, have a readout when the meeting concludes. There are a range of topics on the mind of all of these leaders. As I've noted in here before, we anticipate the meeting discussing a range of the crises we're facing as a global community, from COVID to climate, economic cooperation. I'm sure they all will bring up a number of issues, and we'll have a robust readout when the meeting concludes. Go ahead.
A few questions, like everyone. Sure. In California, Republicans are seeking to nationalize the recall effort against Governor Gavin Newsom and really make it a referendum on COVID policies. You know, the other day, Bernie Sanders tweeted that it's time for Democrats to unite and rally on Newsom's behalf against the recall. Does the president have any plans to personally or otherwise support Newsom if this does make it on the ballot and becomes an off-year campaign?
We're not quite there yet. We've spoken out in support of Governor Newsom and against the recall, so that remains our position.
All right. Also in California, we at the San Francisco Chronicle are finding that school districts are saying, even with this influx of money coming from the package, there's still lots of reasons they're not sure if they can reopen even, by this fall, including building consensus around how to do it. There's been some criticism that the CDC guidance is actually too conservative and prohibitive, including the 6 feet distance rule that schools either have to ignore or not open. If there are still schools that aren't open by this fall, would the administration consider it a failure, and what more could they possibly do to help those schools along?
We have several months before the fall. 6 months? 5 months? Okay, I will stop doing math now. Our Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, this is his number one priority, what he is focused on. The president has asked him to lead this effort, and he is holding a school summit. He will be working with school districts, including, I'm sure, in California and San Francisco and others, to work to address what they feel the challenges are to reopening, whether it's funding that's needed, whether it's consensus building that needs to happen. The president wants schools to be open 5 days a week, wants kids to be learning in school, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that's happening.
And lastly, on the subject of today's briefing, immigration and border policy, it covers so many different agencies. There's Homeland Security, there's HHS, as we've discussed, there's State Department, Department of Justice, which we don't talk about as much, has a huge piece of this. Is there someone in this administration who is coordinating all of these disparate pieces? Ultimately, you know, where does the buck stop? Who is making sure that all these different agencies are coordinating to the administration's overall goals?
Well, ultimately, the president is responsible for the policy on key issues and key challenges the country is facing, and immigration is certainly one of them. You're right; there are a number of agencies involved in this effort, but I would say they're all playing a pivotal role. The Department of Homeland Security, we don't have a Health and Human Services Secretary confirmed yet. When he is, he will play a pivotal role, but a whole team at HHS, as you know. So this is being coordinated in part from our national security team, but ultimately it's the president who makes decisions about the policy. That's why he asked the team to go to the border and why he asked to receive a briefing, and that's something, as I noted, that happened this morning. Go ahead.
Thanks. I have a follow-up on implementation of the relief package and then a question on the equal rights.
Okay.
On the relief package implementation,